Everyone. So right off the bat, I'm going to need help. This second row to my right, your left, just letting you know that row right there will need to be tended to. So if anybody can jump up for me, especially the Queen there or my past presidents, y'all can jump up. And so just letting y'all know right off the bat. I want to say greetings to our friends and so glad to have you with us. Thank you for joining. All of those that are watching online, let us know where you're watching from. Thank you for joining. I want to say we're going to have a wonderful evening together. I believe it'll be a meaningful evening, and I believe you're going to walk away with your heart touched and spirits lifted and ready for Pride Week. We have a wonderful week ahead of us thanks to the Augusta Pride Committee, and so we're excited to have you with us. Tonight we are going to hear from our family, our friends, our allies, from their unique perspective on why pride still matters. We've seen a lot of progress. We've seen a lot of steps towards equality. It seems to be a reoccurring topic with different people. They'll stop and they'll ask me, well, why do you celebrate Pride in June? And of course, around here, that's a great question since it's 500 degrees. No, I'm just kidding. But each speaker, each singer, musician, each message will point us towards the joy and, yes, the necessity of this unique and yearly celebration, along with the message that it proclaims. I want to say a big thank you to our contributors this evening, in particular Father Matt Schnabel and Bishop Greer Gotze there in the back, who is manning our technical aspects, and they helped me pull together a lot of pieces for this evening service, and I want to say thank you. If you're watching online, again, we would love to have you let us know where you're watching from. Let us know how the messages have inspired you, and let us know some of your thoughts on the importance of pride each and every year, why it matters, and why it's important to all of us. And now, let us begin. I'm going to invite Father Matt, if he would, to come, and all of those that are going to participate in the lighting of our candles, if you'll just come at this time, and we will begin our service. We do ask that if you would, to silence your cell phones and take a lot of pictures and post them. Let us know that you were enjoying the service as well. And let's have a wonderful evening, everyone.
We as LGBTQIA people and allies claim the promise of the rainbow as a sign of where we have been and where we are going. We join together to affirm these moments and to map a way forward for those in our community who are still moving forward toward equality. We remember that as a sign of many faiths, the rainbow was used as a promise that violence and oppression would not be used to punish people. We work toward renewed strength and use the rainbow as our sign of a promise to fight for equality. We proclaim our pride. It is easy for society and us to forget the start of Stonewall, that we finally took a stand to police intimidation and abuse and rose and said no more. We affirm that we will not allow others to continue to be forgotten by law enforcement simply because of who they are. We stand for justice and promise to be advocates. with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we remember that the oppressed set the timetable and the agenda for liberation. If we say now is the time, then now is the time. May wisdom sustain us. We remember that we are not isolated or alone in either our oppression or our struggle. May we remember our quest to be our true selves in military service and honor those who have served before the time of open service, so that their struggle will not be in vain. We uphold and honor those who have gone before. We recognize our transgender and non-binary friends and family. We see the struggles that they are facing. We promise to stand with them, to hear their stories, and work with them to challenge society to face its fears, so that all may live into the promise of our nation and to be included in our community equally. We proclaim our vision of diversity and hope and our responsibility to share this vision. May we join with one another in the Spirit to follow in the way of the Hebrew prophet Isaiah, by bringing good news to the oppressed, binding up the brokenhearted, comforting all who mourn, and offering the oil of gladness and lasting joy.
Creator of many names, we recognize these promises that are made before you this day. We celebrate Pride. We ask that our spirit will go as instruments proclaiming peace. May we all be strengthened to endure the fights for equality and continue to move forward with hope and expectation as we look for things to be done. May our spirits, as these flames burn, continue to burn throughout our struggles. Pride Month is currently celebrated each year, and during the month of June in honor of 1969 Stonewall riots. The Stonewall riots were a tipping point for the gay liberation movement in the United States. We're thankful for the gay communities around the country that immediately latched onto the Stonewall riots as an event that brought attention to their cause. Thanks in part to the transgender African-American female Sylvia Rivera and lesbian activist Stormé de Rivera. Just in a year later, in 1970, a committee was formed to commemorate those riots. The committee didn't have a name for the series of events. It wanted to hold in honor of the LGBTQ rights, tossed around a few slogans, gay power for a bit, but then they suggested gay pride. Everyone else agreed on the phrase immediately. On Saturday, June 27, 1970, the first Pride Parade was held in the city of Chicago. While the first Pride Parade may have been in Chicago, the mantle of Mother of Pride belongs to the New Yorker Brenda Howard. Howard, a Bronx-born bisexual woman, organized the Christopher Street Liberation Day March and is hailed as one of the 20th century's leading voices in bisexual rights and equality. Howard's activism spanned decades and led to multiple arrests and civil disobedience, including demonstration for women's health, the rights of those living with HIV/AIDS in the 1980s, and protesting against the firing of a lesbian in Georgia in the 1990s. On June 11th, 1999, President Bill Clinton issued proclamation that declared June as Gay Pride Month. It was the first time a U.S. president had officially recognized June as Gay and Lesbian Pride Month. In the United States, the last day in June was initially celebrated as Gay Pride Day, but the actual day was flexible. In major cities across the nation, the day soon grew to encompass a month-long series of events. We also pause in this moment of celebration. We pause in this time to remember a significant and a momentous moment in our history as we honor and as we remember Juneteenth.
On June 16, 1865, Union Army Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, to announce that the war was over and the Union had won. The announcement came 2 months after the conclusion of the Civil War and even longer since President Lincoln first signed the Emancipation Proclamation. One former slave, Felix Haywood, described his and others' feelings after hearing the message. Everybody went wild. We all felt like heroes, just like that we were free. It didn't seem to make the whites mad either. They went right on giving us food just the same. We knew freedom was on us, but we didn't know what was to come with it. We soon found out that freedom could make some folks proud, but it didn't make them rich. It has been over 150 years ago since the arrival of Major General Granger in Galveston, Texas. During a time when Juneteenth has been referred to as Jubilee Day, Freedom Day, Liberation Day, Emancipation Day, and with President Biden's signature a national holiday observing the end of slavery in the United States. On Tuesday, June 17, 2021, President Joseph R. Biden signed a bill to recognize Juneteenth, the celebration to commemorate the end of chattel slavery in the United States, as a federal holiday. President Biden received the bill to establish June 19th as Juneteenth National Independence Day after it passed in the House 415 to 14 and the Senate unanimously. The Ballad of Birmingham by Dudley Randall, which I will read, sums up the hope and struggle that even through the Declaration was given those years ago, must not forget the struggle that followed, the liberties won, the equality that we still are searching and reaching for across America and the world. The Ballad of Birmingham, on the bombing of a church in Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. Dear mother, may I go downtown instead of out to play and march the streets of Birmingham in freedom's march today? No, baby, no, you may not go. For the dogs are fierce and wild, and the clubs and hoes, guns and jails aren't good for a little child. But mother, I won't be alone. Other children will go with me and march the streets of Birmingham to make our country free. No, baby, no, you may not go, for I fear those guns will fire. But you may go to church instead and sing in the children's choir. She has combed and brushed her night dark hair and bathed rose petals sweet, and drawn white gloves on her small brown hands and white shoes on her feet. The mother smiled to know her child was in a sacred place, but that smile was the last smile to come upon her face. For when she heard the explosion, her eyes grew wet and wild. She raced to the streets of Birmingham, calling for her child. She clawed through bits of glass and brick, then lifted out a shoe. Oh, where's the shoe my baby wore? But baby, where are you? Will you reflect with me with your spirits? Good and gracious one, who loves and delights in all people, we stand in awe before you, knowing that the spark of life within each person on earth is the spark of your divine life. Differences among cultures and races are multicultural manifestations of your light. May our heart and minds be open to celebrate similarities and differences among our sisters and brothers. We place our hope for racial harmony in our committed action and your presence in our neighbor. May all people live in peace, harmony, and equality. This is our hope. This is our heartbeat. This is our cry.
We remember the 49. We gather in hope of life and justice. We are thankful for your creation, for bodies that sweat, that move to the beat of music, that embrace one another with passionate desire. We thank you for the ministry, yes, the ministry of the dance floor that connects us to one another across generations, languages, skin tones, and economic status. May the world all hear our hopes and cries from the dance floor. We are still in need of healing and resolve. But when there is tragedy, it is easy to feel distance from hope, from peace. May we open our senses to be diligent defenders of hope. May the everlasting Spirit help us live with the mystery and tension of sacrifice as we are called to serve our neighbor, labor, and offer our fruits of compassion to this earth. Some sacrifice willingly, others unknowingly. Hold our questions with care. Take our concerns seriously. Know what lies behind our apprehension. Our gratefulness for justice and strides in mercy are strong. We are grateful for the progress of human rights in our world. Yet we are still angry at the denial of justice that exists. May compassionate anger be sparked that will not cease, so together we can continue in the unfinished work of those who have struggled and succeeded before us. We gather to remember the lives of 49 people who were murdered in the Pulse nightclub shooting. We remember the 53 people who were wounded and countless others who were wounded spiritually, psychologically, and physically. In our hopes, we lift these prayers, these thoughts written in text and written in our hearts. We know that the work is not yet done, and the goal of peace is one that can still be reached. Even as we remember the tragedy, we recommit now to acts of compassion in our communities and in the world. May we hold to hope, release courage, and never give up on love in this world. We remember the 49.
Can hold a gun and hold your heart. Can put out fires and make them start. tell me is it wrong to want a little change? Oh, hands, hands, oh, hands, ooh, hands. They can love, they can take, they can fight up until they say they can break the world, they can change it too.
Just take my hand, baby. Everybody's in love.
All that matters is your love. If a million hands can build a wall,
Hands can break it down.
hands can break it down.
Hands can break it down.
Hands can build a wall.
Hands can break it down.
Poem, closeted, the same parts. I stand in a dark room filled with fear and resentment. This stems from the idea that speculation of my identity may hurt my well-being. This dark room soon enclosed me for plenty of my childhood year and became a sense of need. Hiding felt like chains around my body, but also protected me like armor. I desired to be free, but when I tried to reach the door in front of me, these chains pulled me down onto my knees. I can feel people on the outside trying to look in, their eyes filled with acceptance and protection, but mine were too armored to be vulnerable. They struggled to get inside and see, but I struggled to get out and perceive a new view. A knock resonated from the door, almost as a reminder, an alarm that I would snooze because I was not ready to wake up. A lump in my throat began to build, filled with words I would not have the strength to hold. Everything came up roses, and I threw up a garden. I could only lay in the flowers and say such relieving words, I am gay. Closeted vulnerability. Vulnerability. Being open meant being free. Being free meant being vulnerable. Vulnerability meant having cuts all over your body that bleed crimson red without restriction. It wasn't pain that I felt from these wounds, but liberation. The same door that compressed me for so long became a new path of life for my future. The first step outside this new path exalted the pure adolescent nature that was embedded in my body. Letting out a deep secret so massive relieved weight on my shoulders that pushed me down as I reached for my truest self. I could look at my reflection and finally recognize the person looking back at me. I was a stranger that I had the pleasure to get to know. This is what coming out feels like. May we never forget that all are not out. Some are stuck. Some still struggle, but our community, our spirit gives them energy, the inspiration, and the focus to join us one day out in the open.
A slight mess up in the order of service. I would like Michael Jenkins, if he would, to come forward and greet us from Augusta Pride, and then Matt, if you'll sing for us. Isn't it good to have Augusta Pride with us tonight? Let's give him a hand.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for inviting me tonight and kicking off a weeks-long worth of Pride celebrations. I hope you guys are ready. I know I am. But before we dig into that, so we're all here tonight on why Pride still matters. For me, it still matters for those people that are still out there questioning themselves, if they have a sense of belonging. I talked to someone last night. They're still halfway in the closet, halfway out. Their family knows nothing, but they live their personal lives themselves. That's why it still matters. It still matters because there's still stigmas. The last time I was here, World AIDS Day, we talked about it. There's still a stigma around the LGBTQ community. That's why it matters. It matters because when we show up in numbers, they take us seriously. We're not going to hide. There's still lots of laws out there that don't protect us. But luckily, if you guys didn't know, we just got the non-discrimination order passed this past year here in Augusta. That's a huge win. And it's all because we continue, as Lonzo says, showing up and showing out. And this is why Pride still matters. They take you seriously when you show up. So, with that being said, Pride matters. So we've got a lot of stuff going on this week. Obviously, we're kicking it off here. Thank you, Mark, for getting this together in MCC. Tuesday night, we've got Savannah River Brewery kickoff from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. They're brewing up a special brew for Pride. And then if you guys are sponsors, we're going to have the soiree on Thursday night at Sacred Heart. Friday, we've got Beats on Broad, 6 p.m. till midnight. Vintage Oolie's got an amazing show lined up. We've got Adore Delano hitting the stage. Saturday, we've got the parade back at 10 a.m., first time in 2 years, and the most that we've ever seen. We've got over 800 applicants. Now it gets hot. I don't know if they'll all show up, but 800 applicants, more than we've ever seen since 2017, Alan said. So super excited to see that. I know we've got I think 4 or 5 floats, so I'm very excited about the parade. The festival will kick off at 11 and run till 4. We've got Ryan Abel hitting the stage. We've got Jeremiah Lloyd Harmon, Kim and Saul Bear, and then other special guests and speakers going to be there on Saturday as well. So I hope you guys are ready for an amazing weekend. I know I am. I know we are working our butts off, but it's going to pay off because that's why Pride matters. Happy Pride, Augusta.
Mansions fade and disappear like castles in the sand. Power spoils and causes fear, but yields to stronger hands. Fame lasts but a moment, in a moment it is gone. Oh, but love goes on. Beauty fades, and passions wane, and faces show their years. Oh, death steals a lover's touch away, but time dries all the tears. Tunes are soon forgotten, singers lose their songs, but love goes on. Baby boy, starlit sky, kings on bended knee, healing hands bringing sight, then tortured on a tree. A woman sings, rejoicing, he is risen, he is gone, because love goes on.
Good evening. I am Jende Brandon, and I am from the organization of the SGI USA, which is a Buddhist organization here in Augusta. Before I get into what I want to share, I just want to say I am so appreciative and so thankful for being invited today. And I want to also extend how well we know now why pride is so important. I want to thank everyone that has shared from their heart. Lonzo and the poem about the 49, people that have made the ultimate sacrifice. That is why pride still matters. And the song of love that was just sung by Matthew, that is why pride still matters. And also the poem that Mr. Gotzi read to us about the young man that, is still coming out, and, the people that the president knows that are coming out and still struggling. All of those things are why pride still matters. And I wanted to share today some excerpts from the president of our organization. His name is Daisaku Ikeda, and he made a peace proposal in 2015. He started writing this peace proposal in 2015. It's very long, so I'm only going to share parts of it, which I think are very important, especially during the month of June. So, this peace proposal is a shared pledge for a more humane future, to eliminate misery from the earth. Now, some people believe in the idea that history repeats itself. Well, one of the main ideas of this peace proposal is, in contrast, that the future is determined by the depth and intensity of the vow or pledge embraced by people living in the present moment. As human beings, we possess the capacity to take steps to ensure that no one else, including future generations, must endure the sufferings that afflict us today, nor shall they be repeated. The question is, how do we accomplish this? From a Buddhist perspective, and I quote from the peace proposal, in the creation of peace, the heart-to-heart bonds between people awakened to the sanctity of life are even stronger than economic or political ties between nations. Lasting peace cannot be achieved without the realization of the happiness of all humanity. That brings me to a story that I'm going to share, which is also a part of this peace proposal, on transcending the discriminatory consciousness. So there is a disciple who is named Shakyamuni, and I'm going to shorten some of these names because they're Indian names, and so I'm not going to be saying these long names. So this Shakyamuni urged his disciple, we're going to call him Manju, to visit the home of a lay believer who we're going to call Vima, who was suffering from an illness. Another of his disciples, Shariputra, decided, I'm going to go along and visit. The visit occasioned a far-reaching discussion between Manju and Vima on the Buddhist teachings. When this discussion reached its climax, a goddess who was among the listeners adorned everyone with flowers as an expression of joy. Where Sariputra began saying that such flower petals were not appropriate to a practitioner of the way, and he attempted to brush them off, but they stuck to him. Seeing this, the goddess said, flowers do not have a discriminatory consciousness, yet you discriminate among people, thus pointing out the attachments that held Shariputra in his grasp. Shariputra recognized the truth of what she said, but as he continued to question her, the goddess used her magical powers. She changed Shariputra into her form and herself into his. She continued to point out to the baffled Shariputra the depths of his discriminatory consciousness, and then returned them both to their original forms. Through this astonishing sequence of events, Shariputra realized that we must not allow our hearts to become caught up in external appearances, and that all things are without fixed form or characteristics. What I think is significant here is this experience of exchanging forms made it possible for Shariputra to become vividly conscious of the discriminatory gaze he had been directing against this female deity, and that as a result, he was able to become deeply aware of his error. With the advance of globalization, there's more and more movements across borders, and many people, through the experience of visiting or living in another country, have been forced to recognize the kind of discriminatory gaze that they had unconsciously cast on other groups when they were living in their country of origin. This makes it all the more important that people exert themselves to understand the other and see things through their eyes. Without such efforts, particularly in times of heightened tensions, It is all too easy for our own ideas of what constitutes peace or justice to become a threat to the lives and dignity of others. This is why the reversal of perspectives experienced by Shariputra is so important. It opens us up to seeing the threat implicit in the gaze we direct at others. It encourages us to actively imagine the threats felt by others to themselves and their families and subverts our assumptions and assertions. When Shariputra was first encouraged by Shakyamuni to visit the ailing Bhima, his initial response was one of hesitation. And even when he arrived with Manju, he was first concerned about the fact that there was no place for him to sit. For his part, Bhima, when asked the cause of the illness by Manju, responded, "Because all the living beings are ill, I am ill also." She went on to say that his visitors, if they were truly concerned for her well-being, would best express that by caring for and encouraging others suffering from illness. Thus, while Shariputra was occupied with an obsessive concern for himself, Bhima was focused on the reality of suffering experienced by all people, regardless of circumstance, and this distinction between self and other. When we look at current conditions in the world through the lens of the contrast portrayed in this sutra, we can extract the following lesson. While peace and justice should be experienced as a common good, when they are rendered divisible by an excessive concern with the self, they can serve to justify violence and oppression against other groups with whom we find ourselves in conflict. It is always good to understand that we are many in body, but what is important is that we are one in mind. This is why expanding human solidarity based on a shared concern for the threats faced by all of us holds the key to the alleviation of human suffering. Thank you.
This next song that I'm going to do is from The Greatest Showman, and it's This Is Me. And it kind of appealed to me because it's about acceptance. You know, the cast of characters were from the circus, and they were looked at from the people in general as freaks, you know, because they were different. But when I saw this, you know, it really touched my heart, so I wanted to share you guys with it.
Welcome from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Augusta. I'm Reverend Nick Filson, and I couldn't be happier to be joining you all, at least virtually, here at this opening worship service for Pride Week in the CSRA. Sadly, I can't be with you in person because I'm at the General Assembly for the Unitarian Universalist Association, which happens each year the same week as Pride Week here in Augusta. And yet, the technology exists for me to continue to show my love and solidarity with you all for this important event. I wanted to share with you a little bit about how Unitarian Universalists feel and how I feel about the importance of celebrating Pride. And we can't do that without beginning with recognition of the fight that began in 1969 with Marsha P. Johnson throwing that first brick in retaliation for some really heavy-handed and oppressive policing in New York at the Stonewall nightclub. And that fight continues, sadly, because it has to, with some of the legislation that we're seeing happen in states around the country, particularly in Florida, just to the south of us, with the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, which is basically silencing and completely making invisible the whole and holy lives of LGBTQIA people and families in that state. And with that fight, though, I can't think of a better way to continue that fight than the celebratory, loving, just vivacious, full of lifeness of Pride festivals and Pride parades. That celebration itself is kind of a subversive act of saying that we will continue to love radically, be ourselves radically, and do so in spite of the oppression that is basically lorded over LGBTQIA people in this country and in this world. And that to me is, that celebration of love is the celebration of the wholeness of who we are as individuals and who we are as individuals in community. And that experience of pride then just kind of amplifies that holiness to me. Wholeness and holiness to me are basically synonymous. And that experience then makes this perhaps the most special holy day and holy week of the year. Where else in the year cycle do we truly get to celebrate for an extended period of time all of who we are? And so I want to send my love and solidarity and also just the celebratory nature of Pride to you all this week and beyond, and let you know that no matter what happens, I and Unitarian Universalists are in the corner of everyone who deserves the appreciation of and realization of the wholeness of themselves. Everyone who is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, and asexual, and everyone along the spectrum of each of those. We are with you and will be with you until the end. Because we indeed side with love and beloveds. Y'all embody love.
Hello, everyone. I'm Luna Godsey. I'm a subdeacon for St. Francis Parish and Outreach. And I'm a trans woman who's been out for about 4 years now. And I was told that I was going to speak for the trans community, which is a very hard thing to do because there is such a large spectrum of different people in the trans community. It's a rather large umbrella. And so trying to speak for everybody is rather hard. But there's one thing that has brought us together as one community, and that's the struggles that we face every day. And sometimes that's really hard to find the hope in that. Just a couple months ago, we saw one of the many human rights violations that have happened across the country over in Texas. With the passing of the bill that will make it so that Family Child Protective Services can investigate families for giving gender-affirming health care to their child. And it doesn't just stop there either, because that's filled with speculation, and it can be filled with so much he said, she said, and families are terrified because they are being investigated now for giving the love and care to their children. Just this year, there have been 9 families in Texas who are being investigated for supporting their trans children. We've also had Joe Biden the other day, a little bit of hope. He signed an executive order that made it so that federal funding can no longer be used in conversion therapy. That's a little bit of hope in that darkness, but it's not enough. Just this year in the United States, there have been 14 deaths of trans individuals. And that's only the 14 that have been recorded and reported on. A lot of those cases go unrecognized. We have politicians whose entire stance on their platform is that trans people are a danger to children, that they deserve to be locked up, they deserve to be treated poorly simply because of their gender identity. We have people saying that children who are transgender have been groomed and preyed on to think that way. Just the other day, I saw an entire Facebook group that popped up about parents who are struggling about their trans children coming out. And it's not a support group for the children, it's a support group for the parents. And these parents were saying vile things. Things like they had wished that their children had never been born so that they wouldn't have to deal with being trans, and saying it in a negative way. What they were really saying is they didn't want to have to deal with the fact that their children did not fit the status quo. They did not fit the norm. They said things like, how could you be so closed-minded about possibly being cisgender? Making fun of them for being inclusive about their parents' thoughts, rather than the parents thinking about their children. And for the people who pass bills like in Texas, that's their thinking. That children who are being cared for and loved are being abused. And those are the people that I really want to talk about today, because the adults in the trans community, we finally can stand on our own 2 feet. We have our own voice. The children in our community do not. And not even in loving families are those children safe anymore. That's no longer enough. Because some state governments will make sure that even in loving families, they can't be safe. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. And the one way that I say that you can support the trans community is by telling yourself that tolerance is no longer enough. It is no longer enough to be able to say that trans people do exist and that it be it. Because that is the equivalent of seeing someone drowning and just admitting that they are. We need the allies in the community to step up and help us. Help the trans children whose parents' voices are not even enough. We need people to come out and march with us. Some of us were the forerunners of Stonewall. Stonewall never ended. It's still going on today. And even though it seems like some people in the community have it better off than others, as myself, I had a loving family. I had support from everyone around me. I can't let that make myself forget that there are people who have it less than us. And so I ask you this pride to remember this message, that the trans community needs everybody. We need the allies. We need the people outside of the community to march with us to protect the children who are being ripped from their families for being loved. Thank you.
quite enough love for all of us. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all of us. And there's quite enough hope and quite enough power to chase away any gloom. For God, oh God, is in this very room. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all of us. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all of us. And there's quite enough hope and quite enough power to chase away any gloom. For God, oh God, is in this very room. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough hope and quite enough power to chase away any gloom. For God, oh God, is in this very room. In this very
Good evening. My name is Eric Biddy, and I'm the priest at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, just a couple blocks over there on Reynolds Street. I'm honored to have been invited to participate tonight and to talk about why pride still matters. I take it that you don't need to hear from me why pride still matters politically. If we didn't already know, we have learned that all the victories the community has won in recent years have to be defended with the same vigor and dedication it took to win them. I chose those words with some care because I think especially among straight folks like me, there's often an illusion that society evolves and gives these rights and protections as if there's some sort of natural progress toward justice and peace, when in fact they are battles that have to be won not by a political party, but by the community itself, through organization, demonstration, argument, and pressure. But I suspect that you know all that, and don't need a straight priest who is a committed but clumsy ally to tell you about it. So I'm going to talk briefly in religious terms, specifically the terms of my tradition. Pride still matters spiritually because the work of living into the image of God in which we are all created is a never-ending work. Working out in fear and trembling our own salvation is a work that does not end in the time we know. It is a deep conviction in my tradition that all people are created in the image of God. But we all know that for many years, the church got badly confused about the image of God and flipped the mirror so that we made God and the divine love to be our image. It's an honor to speak tonight in an MCC congregation because well before the rest of the main line of Protestantism began to figure this out, the MCC stood not only as a haven for queer folks, but as a prophetic voice to the rest of Christianity. This temptation to flip the mirror and make God in our image is a constant, and maybe especially for those who are used to being near the center of power. I can see two ways that this works. Speaking as a committed Christian who is straight and a frequent guest in the centers of power. First, the heresy of God in the image of a few, or even in the image of the majority, is a direct threat to the survival of queer folks. We affirm that all people, on all points of the spectrums of gender and sexuality, are created in the image of God because that is true. And we must affirm it loudly because doing so saves lives. God made each of us weird and holy, and the effort to force us into the narrow categories of the status quo distorts the fearfully wonderful way that each of us is made in God's very image. We are all in need of salvation, but God can't save the person we pretend to be or the person society wants us to be. It is only the person we really are who can be saved. And second, the affirmation that all genders and configurations of mutual love are made in the image of God can save the church at large from an image of God that is too small. It can protect the church at large from letting the angle of that mirror slip, from letting the sliver of God that we can see get too narrow. Pride still matters spiritually, for as long as anyone is told that they have to reject the unique imprint of the Imago Dei in their lives to be saved. Pride still matters spiritually, for as long as the faith is at risk of forgetting that mutual love is infinitely more various and creative than we could ever imagine. Now, I hate to be the jerk who plays his own song at the open mic and then leaves, but I have a 7-year-old and it's his birthday, and I've barely seen him. So I'm going home, but I'm right over there at St. Paul's and badly want to be in deeper relationship with you. God bless. Happy Pride.
Thank you, Reverend Eric. Thank you all so bringing your thoughts. A couple of thoughts were sent to me by our friends at the Progressive Religious Coalition, which I'm a part of. And Rabbi, good to see you. I'm going to invite you up here in just a second. The president of Progressive Religious Coalition asked me if I would to read some thoughts that he had penned in honor of this evening. Andy Reese writes to us and says, "What a fortuitous coincidence of celebrating Juneteenth and Pride in the same gathering. This day celebrates the day that the last of the enslaved people in Texas learned the South had been defeated and they were now free. But we know that freedom was incomplete and would become more elusive as time went on. Within 10 years, Jim Crow laws backed up the vigilantes would impose a reign of terror on black men, women, and children across the nation. It took almost a century for continuous resistance and activism to finally get the various civil rights laws passed in the 1960s. Similarly, the LGBTQIA community has suffered discrimination and violence for centuries. Finally, in June of 1969, at the Stonewall nightclub in New York, came the "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore" movement. That violent resistance sparked the drive for equal and fair treatment. Some of the leaders of the black civil rights movement were gay, and they started to apply the lessons that they had learned from achieving equal treatment for their community, continuing public and private pressure to overturn old discriminatory laws and enact new ones to prevent discrimination on the basis of gender. But perhaps of more importance was the willingness of so many people to claim their real identity and started to change that culture. When people were confronted with a child or a cousin or a good friend who came out, they started to realize the typical stereotypes didn't fit the real people they knew. John or Mary was still the same person who had been known and loved for years. I'm a case in point. I grew up in rural Oklahoma in the 1950s and became and had the same inherited prejudice of that time in place. Besides, I didn't know anyone who wasn't straight, or at least I thought I didn't. It turned out that my best friend in high school was a closeted gay boy. Then, when I went to college, my roommate was also a closeted gay man. As I met real people who were not straight, I realized that they had the same wants, aspirations, and needs as I do. They just want to be loved and accepted for who they really are. Besides, I could never understand why what other people did in bed had any effect on me as long as it didn't involve me or my wife Alice. It was none of their business, none of my business. I became involved in an active work in 1970 in a Presbyterian congregation in Cleveland, Ohio. One of the reasons I joined the Unitarian Universalist Church here was because they were the ones who were actively involved in activities. Some years later, Sid Gates invited me to join the Progressive Religious Coalition. This was a group that actively worked for fair, equitable, and just treatment for everyone. They believed the biblical injunction that God's love has no exceptions, so ours can't either, if we are considered ourselves children of God. We really hope, brothers and sisters, as one of my religious ancestors says, we don't have to believe alike to love alike. Or, as our contemporaries, the young blood saying, we must try to love one another right now. And at this time, I want to invite Rabbi Robert Clenson, if you would come to share a few words, and then our keynote, Mr. Isaac Kelly, will follow him right up. So, Rabbi, if you would come join me at the podium. God bless you for being here.
I thank you. It's good to be here. Having spoken at this service last year at some length, and after hearing the words that came from the PRC, the Progressive Religious Coalition President, Andy Reese, I just want to take a moment to reaffirm my personal support and commitment, and that of the Progressive Religious Coalition of Augusta, and the reform movement of Judaism to the LGBTQIA+ community. I've deeply valued the opportunity to work alongside the ministers of this church, going back to the time when Lisa Heilig served as your interim minister. While Pride events have been taking place in Augusta for several years, there's a special significance to again having it include this religious service, especially with the interfaith participation. For all too long, and still in the minds of many people, there's the impression that the religious community is opposed to equality for the LGBTQIA community. We stand here, as do many of the religious leaders and individuals in the religious community in Augusta, to say that is not the case. We as people of faith support you, support your community, support the LGBT community, the African American community, all of us. And hopefully, maybe as people get to know us as people, they'll come to respect us, to realize that we are all children of God. I think we probably all know some people who never met a black person or a Jew or an Asian or a member of the LGBT community and have their stereotypes and their negative attitudes. But once they get to know us on a personal level, realize that we're people too. That we can be good people, that there's a gentleness in us, there's a love in us. As we form those personal relationships, people may change. It's not up to us, it's not up to you to make them change. Although we need to do everything we can to change the laws and change the actions of others. But just by our actions and our respect for them, and sometimes we'll make mistakes in what we say and how we say it, as they will, but to recognize that as a mistake and that they need the education, they need to be brought along not just by the laws and not just by the rules and not just by the criticism, but by the love that we show them, by the relationships that we show them as individuals. I thank you for this opportunity to be with you today, to participate in this service. Together, may we continue to strive to bring understanding and respect for all people. Thank you.
And it is my wonderful pleasure to bring up to the podium the one we've all been waiting for. The first time I ever met Isaac Kelly, I knew I would like him because he's a Cadillac guy. And I think I'm going to get to have a look at that Cadillac that's sitting outside. He wouldn't lend me the keys for some reason before service, but Isaac, I want you to come share your heart with us. Thank you for all that you've done for our community, and thank you for being here tonight. Would you give him a hand?
Well, good evening, everyone. So Mark had messaged me roughly a week and a half ago and asked me if I would come tonight and share my thoughts and from my perspective on why pride still matters. And I love the theme. And I tell you, it's a hard act to follow with all of the other speakers and the ones that shared tonight with your talents and your thoughts and the poems. And I appreciate every one of you. And I appreciate everybody that showed up tonight. As Lonzo always says, show up, show out. And also everyone that's tuning in with our live feed. But to share with my perspective of why pride still matters, I had to go back to the beginning of when we actually started it. So Augusta Pride, as we know it in this century, started off in the filling station back in April of 2009, way before it was the Edge nightclub. It was just a bar no bigger than 800 square feet and a decently sized patio off the back. I didn't know this at the time, but this would be the second attempt at kicking off a Pride event. The first Pride held in Augusta was in the early 90s. I believe it was 90 or 91. Shortly after we kicked off this Augusta Pride, somebody had brought a flyer that they had saved. And it was a handwritten flyer announcing what they were going to do and that they were going to have a parade that day. I was about to say, I think we have it. Lonzo's pointing and saying we have it. We actually, and we're going to be including a lot of this in the historical archive on our Augusta Pride page too as well. So that was when I was in middle school. Just imagine the courage and the fortitude to have a parade back then. You know, fast forward to April 2009, and we were in a better place. Not much better, but a better place. I remember we were talking about what the next step in our community was going to be. The room was full of well-known, well-educated, successful people, people that were way smarter than I were at the time and way more experienced than I. Basically, that led the discussion of what our next step was for our local queer community here in Augusta. We led the discussion of all of our options and the realistic outcomes of what would work, what we thought would, bring us together and unify us. Unanimously, we decided that the next thing we should do was a Pride event, to have Pride in Augusta. Actually, together, after we decided that, it was that night we decided on who was going to be a part of the board, and we founded Augusta Pride that night on that evening. Augusta Pride Incorporated, as we know it. A young and eager 27-year-old at the time, I had already started Outlandish, which was a local LGBTQA, we labeled it GLBT back then, but it was a local queer community where we could have dinner every Tuesday. Actually, a lot of people here tonight, you may remember those events. Movie nights out, Capital Out. Outlandish dinners every week. I can't believe we did that every Tuesday. But back then, nobody went out to restaurants every Tuesday. It was a blessing to the restaurant and a time where we could all get together, and we had sometimes 50 and 60 people show up at a time. But as I said, a young and eager 27-year-old, I think after my purpose and mission was to galvanize our community and unify us and provide a space where people of all ages could mingle. This is the first time that I've met a lot of you through those dinners and through those events. I think after having a few years of success in that is why the board, the new family board that night said, well, Isaac, we think you should be president. Well, I'm a 27-year-old with a room full of people that have way more experience in education and just everything. I was a youngin'. I was so naive. And of course I said yes. So my passion had kind of shown through in that, and I'm assuming that's what they saw. But I believe this is why they elected me as the first president. Thankfully, that excitement and that vision that we all had overshadowed the nervousness that I had, and it would deliver me through the challenges that awaited us on the road ahead. Our queer community at the time was starving for something to unify us. We all needed something to serve as the galvanizing spark in our community that we didn't know how bad we actually needed it. Word spread fast about our event over the coming months. It became citywide news in the beginning of 2010 when Travis, who is here tonight, actually applied for our parade permit. The mayor didn't immediately sign off on our permit as he did for dozens of others throughout the year. Instead, he deferred it to the city's legal counsel to confirm our legal right to have a gay pride parade. Politically, this is actually a well-played strategy. Deke was a good mayor, I believe, because at the end, even though he deferred the decision, which was quite smart by his part, eventually that same year, we actually had a proclamation for June 19th, which was the first Augusta Pride date, which is today, to be a Gay Pride or a Pride Proclamation Day of Augusta in Augusta, Georgia. So he did turn out to be pretty good, but in the beginning I could see the strategy. Now I respect it, the older I am. But so you can't really blame him because the local area was a heavily Republican-ran metro area. If you look back to that time frame, that we had a lot of leadership in Augusta that were of old school ways and old school thinking. And the more we could keep our gay and queer community hushed into the side, the better it was. So I honor that and I respect that, but at the end, he did turn out to be pretty well. But then the news article came out about this actually happening, and this served as a good forecast of what was to be expected with the reactions from our metro community as a whole. Now keep in mind, this is before large socially conscious companies like ADP, Starbucks, Amazon, T-Mobile, before any of those were in town. The larger companies that were already here, such as SRS, Georgia Power, Kimberly-Clark, things of that sort, they didn't have a strong local diversity group. I think Kimberly-Clark at the time, I had reached out to them, and their closest one was Atlanta. And it was the only one in the country at the time, I think, besides the locations over there in California. I remember walking down Broad Street to hand out pride flags to our local businesses so they can draw a crowd. I said, hey, we're going to have a little event this weekend, and if you present this pride flag in your window or at your business, it might draw a few extra dollars for you. It could have an economic impact on your business. I was kicked out of most of the businesses in down on Broad Street. I had owners tell me exactly what they told the news, that they were going to have to close their doors and they were going to go broke because this event was happening in downtown Augusta, Georgia. And this is 2009, so this is not that far away. That was not that long ago. The things that people would say about the queer community, including about the Augusta Chronicle, and we all know what trolls are, and they were alive and well, all 5 of them on the Augusta Chronicle. And of course I loved it because there were more comebacks and support for our cause and our parade and our celebration. We probably had close to 600 people. I think I remembered because I remember the board telling me not to read it because it would just take up too much of my time, and I would get deferred from what the cause was and what the purpose was, and don't put your mind and your thoughts into what they're saying. I couldn't help it. It was a train wreck. But I loved how our community stepped up, because those trolls that were, for lack of a better word, that were just bashing our event and for some reason thought that the taxpayers of Augusta was going to pay for our event. Several comments about that. Why is this city of Augusta spending money and wasting money on this event? I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't received $1 from the city of Augusta. But we couldn't tell them that and they wouldn't listen to us anyway. But we had a good support on the Augusta Chronicle come back. I remember people in the queer community, friends of mine, that I had met over the years, telling me that if I were to take this on, I would be committing career suicide. I also remember I was telling my mother, who was also my boss, that the newspapers were going to do a story about me and the Pride event coming up on the next day. I was telling her, in order to prepare her, since she is a well-known and well-respected business owner since 1979, and the fact that I also worked as an employee of one of her companies. I was apologizing ahead of time to her for any backlash that she would receive from her clients and maybe possibly even our own employees. I'll never forget what she said. She said, if anyone has an issue with this, they don't deserve to do business with us. Yeah, she's a pretty strong woman. So with that instilled and job security afoot, we moved forward. We had a couple more articles come out. Word started getting out. So we got past the initial bashings in the local media and started advertising the event with the help of the local CVB. By this time, we attracted crowds of supporters and allies. When we actually pulled it off and the first Augusta Pride event was in the books, it was a huge success. I reflected on the message I kept telling the board every month in our monthly board meetings. If we help just one young person in our area feel less ashamed or have a reason to be proud of who they are, and help them find their voice. All of this effort, the money, the time, will all have been worth it. And I remember saying that at almost every meeting, because when we started worrying about how we were going to pay for things, you know, I had grandiose visions back in the day, 2009 to 2010. You guys, if that really came to true, Riverwalk would have been taken up, the Augusta Common would have taken up, Broad Street and Reynolds was going to be closed down. I had big dreams, big vision, and we're almost there. Thanks to the current leadership, we took over a part of Broad Street last year, so that's actually, But I had big dreams and I had no way to pay for it. So once the board kind of got my feet back on the ground and we decided on the Augusta Common alone and just to do it there, great decision. We had actually, we started planning the process. We started putting the work into final pitches and everything else like that, and 3,000 and some change people showed up that day. And that was the estimate from the local Richmond County Sheriffs. I said if we have about 1,000 or 1,500, we're doing pretty good. We had double that. The next year, I believe the numbers were over 4,000. The year after that was over 6, and we just kept going. And I can assume, but I think the highest numbers we reached pre-COVID was 14,000 plus in our town. And when I was such a nerd back in the day, I used to take zip code surveys. I would have people come around and track zip codes to the attendees of Augusta Pride, because to me that I could use that. Hey, did you know that 25 to 30% of our attendees are from out of town? All that good stuff. Little things and little tricks that I had learned from other Pride organizations around the area. But it was a huge success. And with that message that I kept repeating to the board, that then moves me into the impact of Pride over the several years. So within a week of our first Pride, a young man came to a dear friend of mine, Daddy Keith, rest his soul, who used to manage the bar, Argos, on Walton Way. And he explained to Daddy Keith that he read the Pride article about him and David, his partner, in the local Metro Spirit, that week was going to be the week after he contemplated for months on why it was not worth living. That week is the day that when reading that article and seeing that there were others like him and that there was support, was when he turned it around and he said, you know what, maybe it is worth living. We all cried in the bar that night. I still cry when I think about it. He finally found his life worth living, and that was huge. And I thought about that saying that I kept saying to the board over and over. Even if we change one life, even if we affect one person, one young person, just think about what that means. Is that worth all the time and money and effort? I'm in church, so I can't curse, but I'm going to say, heck yeah. You all probably have stories that you may have heard over the years from people in our area that were influenced by our events over the years. I've had parents come up to me and thank me for opening their eyes to the reality of their own child's potential and struggle at the same time, and they actually started listening to their children. They would admit to loving them even more and feeling that same feeling of more love and more compassion in return from their children. I had several straight couples would tell me stories about how it impacted their families and encouraged others to live out their true selves. Now that I'm pushing 40, I've met so many people that were younger then, like me. George, thank you for reminding me tonight. I saw George for the first time in probably since 2010, 11, or 12. And I had to remind him who I was. He goes, when I saw you last, you were skinnier and younger. It's true. It is very true. I'm happily married too. So that's my excuse. I've met so many people that were younger then, and they would tell me the impact it has on their life and how it impacted who they are today and what they do today. Now, Augusta actually embraces Pride now as one of the largest economic impacts in our local area. And it is one of the best well-run events, quote unquote, from the city of Augusta, organizers and whatnot. The people that we have to deal with to get the permits and have the parade and have the festival, they still to this day say that Augusta Pride is one of the best. You guys are easy. You're organized. You got it all together. You know what you want to do. There's no drama. I said, man, we got them full, didn't we? But, Michael shared something earlier, and because of the recent laws that were passed in Augusta, the city of Augusta has now scored higher on HRC's Municipal Equality Index. And because of this, more diversity-focused companies using that index to consider where they move have moved here. So when you think about the economic impact of events, you usually limit it to what happens that weekend, how many hotels you do, how many hotels you book, how many people come in and eat at our restaurants and everything else. It is way more than that. The business and the commerce impact overall has made Augusta a very attractive location to move to as far as larger companies, larger entities that are looking for societies and communities that are diverse and that they could operate in and still drive their diversity and inclusion. D&I is probably one of the biggest things being in the HR industry. D&I is one of the biggest focuses right now. SHRM, the Society of Human Resources Management, the American Staffing Association, everybody's pushing it. I love it. But that was only because of events like Pride. That was from the mountains of work and time and effort of people putting this in front, putting this in the view of everyone, right? So imagine that we didn't get together in the bar that night in April of 2009. Imagine if we had never had the courage to say, we're here and let's celebrate our differences. Imagine if Pride's all over the nation and globe didn't happen. Where would we be then? Would we have passed the marriage equality laws that have protected us and now allows me to wear a ring and I'm legally married to my lovely husband? Would we actually be able to normalize LGBTQ families with children and adoption? I mean, these are topics that are being talked about in almost every line in every industry on how to be inclusive on that. Would we have squashed the don't ask, don't tell? I served 3 years and 8 months, and people ask me, why did you serve just 3 years and 8 months? Well, they asked. I told. My great sergeant called me the Great Hope, because I was the only one that actually cared. But my first sergeant didn't have a say in that. My new captain did. My stuff was wrapped up on a pallet and we were ready to fly out. It was years after 9/11, but we were finally being mobilized. And he gave me my discharge papers and told me to get my stuff off the pallet, turn it into supply, and go home. Don't ask, don't tell was repealed in 2016, I believe, 2015 or 16, and they did an article on me there again because it's near and dear to my heart. I could have been over there fighting with my brothers and sisters, but instead, I was here because I was gay, and that was frowned upon by my new captain. So would we have squashed that if we didn't have all the activity and the action and the empowerment that Pride gives us? There's no end to our mission. Having a whole month dedicated to Pride with ongoing events and celebrations is incredible, especially considering how not so recent history would never have thought the LGBTQ community would be able to live openly, freely, and happily. Stonewall was the spark of our movement, and the moment a few very courageous and very strong people said, no longer shall we be treated as lesser human beings. 2019 actually marked the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall uprising in New York City, At that time, only 50 years ago, people weren't out, and violence and harassment was a normal occurrence with minimal legal protections of any sort. Pride matters because countless people have lost their jobs, have lost their families, and lost their lives to be able to live in a peace with themselves. We can hold hands, dress how we want, have families, and for the most part, do so without fear. A lot of brave women and men fought for that, and what we have today is thanks to them. We've been given the incredible responsibility to carry the movement into the next 50 years. Awareness is the biggest impact, in my belief, that Pride has. Pride celebrations include more expressions of life than just marching and sharing that you can face the world without fear. Pride is the beacon for living your true self. That's why we call it Pride. That's why it stuck so many years ago, just like Mark was explaining earlier. We are experiencing the compound effect of all of the actions of our communities across the nations over time, and we cannot let that movement and we cannot let that passion grow dim. There is no end to our mission, because if we were not to hold the festival, if we didn't honor what those before us fought for, if we didn't keep celebrating our diversity to be your true selves, then we would be at the mercy of others that may not see us as equals because we are different. We need to keep showing that what makes us different is what makes our communities so beautiful. Pride still matters because the benefits that we experience today are from the actions of those before us making that very statement. We need to do the same thing for those who will inherit this community after we are gone. We have to carry on the mission of loving everyone, regardless of the differences. I think the rabbi and several other of the religious leaders tonight had spoken to that. I loved their messages because it speaks volumes, and it doesn't matter that I practice in a different way. I still love you, I'm here, and I'm supporting you. That really tonight I was crying. I cry a lot. I cry at 30-second commercials, but that really touched me tonight, and it just reawakens that passion to fight to keep this. Pride is a part of the bigger picture that will continue to enrich our community for years to come. So I have a call to action. When I was recruiting for volunteers for board members in the early years, I used to use a phrase that I picked up from South Carolina Pride's president at the time. I said, Augusta Pride needs your time, your talent, and your treasure. For those of you shaking your heads, you remember when I probably told that to you and dragged you into it too. Time, talent, or treasure. You may not have all three, but if you got one, bring it. I still have a goal written down from those early years to build and finance a Pride Community Center right here in downtown Augusta. I envision that this would be a home for Augusta Pride and a center for hope and awareness year-round. A safe place for those that needed a space for their meetings, support groups, or a place to hang out. This is my challenge to myself, and this is my current battle, so to speak. I want to be able to do that. It's a goal of mine. It's been there for 10 plus years, and that's what I'm working towards now. My goal to you, or my challenge to you, is to get something and your time, your talent, or your treasure, and to call up the people that run Augusta Pride at the time. Currently, he's sitting right here tonight. And if you haven't done anything recently for Augusta Pride and you want to know how, get in touch with Michael tonight. Tell him that you've got treasure, tell him that you've got the time, or tell him that you've got a talent that you would like to share, because I guarantee you we need it. I challenge us all to give each one of these and keep our community's Pride movement going. It's important and vital to our community's success. I've already listed a couple of things tonight. Not only is it going to make it a better place to live, but we're going to attract the company and the people that we like, that are similar, right? We're going to attract the companies that like to do business with diversity and inclusive companies and like to hire diversified and inclusive. It's imperative to ensure that we don't take any unnecessary steps backwards in our progress. To not contribute to this mission would be a disgrace to those that have fought so hard so that we can meet here in this place and not have to hide who we are. I want to thank you for your time tonight. I love you all, and happy Pride.
Thank you, Isaac. A lot of great words, a lot of great thoughts. And not being from Augusta all those years, it's kind of cool to catch it up. It was really cool for me. Thank you so much. So I know we've been sitting for a while, and I appreciate it. Maybe those benches are a little numbing to your backside. So if you want, while I sing, if you know the song, and I think probably most of us do, you're more than welcome to join in. I've asked Lisa, I've asked Matt to help me out. If they want to just come up and sing along, please do it.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend, and I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long, and I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can feel those of your needs that you won't let show. You just call on me, brother and sister, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. See, I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me, come on. When you're not strong, I'll be your, there you go, honey, and I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on me, brother and sister, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. See, I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, see, I'm just right up the road, and I'll share your load if you just call me. Call me if you need a friend. Come on, you can. If you need a friend, Can I call you? Call me if you need me. Oh, come on, just call me. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for being here this evening. I know it's rather long, but we appreciate your thoughts, your songs, your hearts, all that you have given this evening. Isaac, thank you so much for sharing with us. I want to thank all of our Augusta Pride committee members, our board members, those who have plugged away over these last many, many years. Thank you so much for your tireless effort to bring us to this place. And thank you. And I know we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful time. Two things that I want to share with you, and then we're going to get out of here. An excerpt from a sermon that was read by Reverend Mark Stewart, and then I want to leave you with a closing video, and then we will be dismissed. The rainbow has a much larger significance. It is a gift to us from on high. It is to the natural world, refracting diversity from something that is already at unity in the sun. One light, many hues of color. The Spirit from on high comes to us, not to force submission of the individual, but to triumph among us. The Spirit refracts one into many hues, tints, and shades. Its unity is a given and demonstrated in diversity. The many people, races, and cultures from many countries, men, women, young and old, gay, straight, or a great multitude come together, all speaking the same language of the magnificent works of the one above. The rainbow depends for its strength on embracing all the colors of the spectrum. It does not absorb, but displays the individual gifts in order to make it complete and more brilliant. I'll leave you with that, this final video, and as it concludes, feel free to be dismissed. Thank you so much for being a part. Happy Pride, and we look to see you throughout this week.
We've been taught that silence would save us, but it won't.
I can't live my life straight because you're straight. I can't. I just gotta live my life for me and do it for me because this is my life.
I've done my hair down, I've worn the dresses, I've done things that aren't natural to me to please other people.
I was told to wipe off my makeup and be a boy. What they should have told me was to be myself.
If other people aren't comfortable, that is not your problem. That is their problem.
I want to tell other queer people that it is okay to be yourself. We won't stand for hatred.
LGBTQ plus people are strong and resilient. We're not gonna go away.
It's so important that we keep fighting for the right to be who we are, the right to love whoever we want to love.
Like all the civil rights movements that have gone before, we're not going to give up.
I'm still a proud gay man, okay?
We have to be out and proud and visible where we can for the people where they can't.
I live Pride every single day.
Refuse to ever give up.
Los amamos.
I love you. Stay strong.